9 days ago, Alex Eala was down a set to the third best tennis player in the world, and she won the last 8 games of the match to make history. Today, she won 4 games in the entire match. 4. I want to say that number one more time, because it does not sit right. 4 games against Belinda Bencic. The second set finished 6-love. Not a tight set that slipped away at the end, not one bad service game that cost her. 6-love. She won the very first game of the match, and then she won 3 more the rest of the way, and that was the whole story. Here is what makes it strange. Same player, same continent, same hard courts, same month of the same season. In Washington, she beat the world number 10. Then she beat a 4-time Grand Slam champion. Then she came back from a set down against the world number 3 and became the first Filipina in history to win a WTA Tour title. That was August 1st. Today is August 10th. So how does one human being turn into 2 completely different tennis players in 9 days? That is the question, and I want to be honest with you right at the top. The answer is not where you are going to look for it. It is not in the Bencic match. Bencic did not solve her. Nobody found some secret weakness that Naomi Osaka and Jessica Pegula somehow missed. If you spent that round of 16 searching for the moment it went wrong, you were watching the wrong tournament entirely. Because that streak did not end in Toronto, it ended in Washington, on the exact night that an entire country was celebrating. And once you see how, you cannot unsee it. There are 3 things sitting inside those 7 wins that almost nobody talked about while they were happening, because at the time, they all looked like good news. A win is a win. A comeback is a comeback. Put them side by side in order, though, and they stop reading like highlights. They start reading like a countdown. But none of that lands until you understand what that streak actually was and what it was worth to her. Because 7 wins sounds like a statistic. It was not a statistic. It was the most valuable 2 weeks of the entire career of Alex Eala, and I do not think most people watching have any idea how much it cost her to get them. To understand what just ended, you have to understand what it was. Alex Eala is 21 years old. She is from the Philippines, a country that had never produced a top 100 WTA player before she did it, and until 16 months ago, most American tennis fans had never heard her name. That changed in Miami in the spring of 2025. She walked into that WTA 1000 as a wild card, which in plain English means the tournament did her a favor by letting her in at all, and she beat the world number 5, and then she beat the world number 2, back to back. She reached the semifinals. She became the first Filipina to do almost every single thing she did that week, and she finished that season ranked 50th in the world. That was the breakout. This year was supposed to be the year she proved it was not a fluke. So keep that in your head while I walk you through the last 2 weeks of July and the first 10 days of August. She arrives in Washington, D.C. for the Mubadala D.C. Open. She is ranked 28th in the world. She wins her opening match. Then she wins her second. Then she runs into Elina Svitolina, the second seed, the world number 10, a former WTA Finals champion, and she beats her 6-3, 6-4, which was her 6th win over a top 10 player in 2026 alone. Semi-final, Naomi Osaka. 4 Grand Slam titles, former world number 1, one of the most famous athletes on the planet. First time these two had ever played each other. Eala wins 6-4, 6-2. Final, Jessica Pegula. World number 3. The match gets stretched across 2 days. Pegula takes the first set 6-4 and is leading, and at 4 all in the second set, Eala raises her level and simply never lowers it again. She wins the last 2 games of that set and then all 6 games of the third. 8 games in a row to close out a championship. That is the first WTA Tour singles title in the history of Philippine tennis. And this is the part that gets lost when everyone is busy celebrating. That title moved her from 28th in the world to 20th. Top 20. First time in her life. Highest-ranked Filipino player in the history of the sport by a distance that is not close. 500 ranking points in a single week, the biggest points haul of her career, taken off the top 3 seeds and the defending champion. Then she got on a plane. 3 days later, she is in Toronto at the Canadian Open, a WTA 1000. Seeded 25th. She beats Alicia Parks in 3 sets. She beats Katie McNally in 3 sets. 7 straight wins, the longest winning streak she has ever had. And here is why this specific loss matters more than a normal loss. The US Open starts in a matter of weeks. Toronto was not just another tournament on the calendar, it was the last real measurement of Alex Eala before the biggest stage in American tennis, in the country where this channel lives, in front of the exact crowd that has been showing up for her with flags all summer. Everything she does for the next month gets read through what happened this week. And for the first time in her entire life, she walked onto a court carrying something. Not chasing, carrying. There is a version of Alex Eala who is the underdog nobody scouts, and that version died on August 1st when she lifted that trophy. If you have been watching her since Miami, you already know the feeling I am describing, that strange mix of pride and dread that shows up when someone you have followed finally gets big enough to have something to lose. If that is you, subscribe before we go any further, because the next 3 weeks of her career are going to be covered here match by match, and I do not want you finding out from a headline. So when you look at that 7-match streak, you see momentum. 7 wins, 3 of them over players ranked above her. 1 of them, historic. But look at how those 7 wins actually happened, one at a time, in order, and something else starts showing up in the score lines. Something that was there the entire time. Start with the obvious explanation, because it is the one everybody reached for within about 10 minutes of the final score. Maybe she is not as good as those 2 weeks made her look. Maybe the level was borrowed. Maybe Toronto was the correction. Look at who she beat. Svitolina, world number 10, 6-3, 6-4. And that was not a scrappy win. Eala broke her serve 4 times and closed the first set in 43 minutes. On return points alone, she won 24 to Svitolina's 13. That is not surviving a top 10 player. That is dismantling one. Osaka, 4 major titles, 6-4, 6-2. Pegula, world number 3, from a set down. So when you tell me Belinda Bencic beat her 4 games to 12, I have a very simple question. What exactly can Bencic do that Naomi Osaka cannot? Because I have watched a lot of tennis and I cannot give you an answer to that. There is no shot in the Bencic toolbox that Osaka does not also own, in most cases with more power behind it. If this were a talent gap, Osaka would have found it first. So it is not the level, which means we have to look somewhere else. Look at how those wins arrived. The first 2 of the streak in Washington were straightforward. Svitolina, straight sets. Osaka, straight sets. Right up through that semifinal, Alex Eala was winning like the best version of herself in 2 sets, in about 90 minutes, walking off court with something left in the tank. Then the final happened. Pegula won the first set 6-4. The match got suspended and pushed into a second day, which means Eala spent an entire night sitting with the knowledge that she was 1 set away from either making history or losing a final. She came back the next day still trailing. She had to grind to 4 all in the second set before she found the level that won her the title. Then she flew to Canada. First match in Toronto. Alicia Parks. 6-1 in the first set, comfortable, and then Parks takes the second, 6-4, and it goes to a decider. Second match, Katie McNally, a player ranked 70th in the world who arrived having just eliminated the reigning Wimbledon champion. 2 hours and 39 minutes. Eala served for that match at 5-4 in the second set and could not close it. McNally won 3 straight games to take the set 7-5. That is 3 consecutive matches that went to a final set. 3 in a row. And Eala won all 3 of them, which is why nobody sounded any alarms, because in tennis, A win erases the effort it took, but ask the question the wins were hiding. She kept winning. At what price? Here is the price. In the middle of the McNally match, she rolled her ankle. She did not retire. She did not take a long medical timeout and disappear. She got up and played another set and a half on it and won 6-4. Afterward, she said, in about as many words, that she survived it and that it was brutal. Now put the calendar next to that. 4 matches in 5 days. 7 consecutive wins. 2 countries. A championship match that bled across 2 calendar days. A flight. A new city. A new crowd. A new surface speed. A new tournament with a bigger draw and better opponents. And an ankle that was fine right up until it was not. Recovery had stopped being something she did between matches. Recovery had become part of the competition itself. And the strange thing is that even knowing all of that, the McNally win made her look tougher, not weaker. She got pushed to 3 sets by a player ranked 50 spots below her, and she still found a way. The reports coming out of Toronto that night were glowing. She was going to arrive against Bencic with something more valuable than momentum. She was going to arrive knowing that when the match turns ugly and the body hurts, she can still win it. 2 days later, she played Belinda Bencic for the first time in her life. She won the opening game, broke the Swiss immediately. The crowd was full of Philippine flags and it was loud, and for about 4 minutes it looked like it was going to be another one of those nights. And then it just stopped. She never established anything again. Not one stretch of 2 good games in a row. Bencic took the first set 6-4 and the second set 6-love, and if you were watching for the turning point, you never found one, because there was not one. There was no collapse. There was no meltdown. There was no tactical adjustment at the changeover that flipped the match. It was over almost before it started, and it stayed over. So now look at what we actually have. A player who beats the world number 3 from a set down cannot be a level problem. A player who wins 3 consecutive deciding sets cannot be a mental problem. A player who plays a set and a half on a rolled ankle and still wins cannot be a toughness problem. Every explanation we have tried has failed on contact, which usually means one thing. We have been asking the wrong question this whole time. Here is what I think actually happened, and I want to warn you that it is going to sound like a small idea before it turns into a large one. That 7-match streak was never building momentum. It was spending it. We talk about momentum in sports like it is a battery. Every win charges it a little more, so the longer the streak runs, the more powerful the player becomes, and a player on a 7-match run is more dangerous than the same player fresh. That is the entire language we use. Riding a hot streak, full of confidence. Unstoppable. It is completely backwards. Momentum is not a battery. It is a fuel tank. It starts full, and every single match takes something out of it that does not come back until you stop playing. A straight sets win is a small withdrawal. A 3-setter is a large one. A 3-setter where you fail to serve out the match and have to win it twice is enormous. A championship final that gets suspended overnight against the world number 3, with the weight of an entire country sitting on it, is not a withdrawal. It is the account. Alex Eala did not arrive in Toronto full. She arrived in Toronto, having already spent everything she had in Washington to win the biggest thing she has ever won. And then she played 2 more matches anyway, and won both of them. On nothing. That is the part I cannot get past. Look at the streak again with this lens on, and it reads completely differently. The 2 wins in Toronto were not evidence that she still had it. They were evidence of how much she was willing to burn to keep going. Parks pushed her to 3 sets. McNally pushed her to 3 sets and took her ankle with her. Each of those was a payment on a card that was already maxed out, and the cost was never only physical. This is the piece that gets left out of every analysis I have seen, and it might be the biggest one. On the 1st of August, Alex Eala did something no Filipino tennis player had ever done in the history of the sport. That is not a normal Tuesday at the office. That is the ceiling of a childhood. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes after you finally get the thing you have organized your entire life around, And it does not live in your legs. It lives somewhere that does not show up on a medical timeout sheet, and there is no treatment for it except time, and time is exactly what the tour calendar refuses to give anybody. She got 3 days. So Belinda Bencic did not beat the Alex Eala who beat Jessica Pegula. I want to be very precise about this, because it is not an excuse, and I am not trying to take anything away from Bencic, who is the 14th best player in the world and who earned that result. Bencic beat the Alex Eala, who was in the second week of a sprint with no finish line, playing her 4th match in 5 days in her second country, on a rolled ankle, 3 days after the emotional peak of her entire life. Those are 2 different athletes wearing the same face. And if that reframe just landed for you the way it landed for me, I want to hear it. Drop a comment with the moment you think the streak actually ended. Washington final, McNally, or somewhere else entirely. I read them and I have changed my mind about a match more than once because somebody in the comments saw a pattern I missed. Because here is what makes this idea worth more than a nice theory. It makes a prediction. If I am right, the loss should have a specific shape to it. Exhaustion does not look like getting outplayed. It looks like something else, and it leaves fingerprints. Theories are cheap. So let us go check. There are 3 things in that Bencic match that give the whole thing away. The first one is the shape of the loss itself. Eala won the opening game and then never established anything for the rest of the night. 6-4, 6-love. And that pattern matters far more than it sounds, because tactically beaten players and physically emptied players lose in completely different rhythms. When a player gets solved, the loss is gradual. You can watch it happen. She tries a pattern. It fails. She adjusts. The adjustment gets punished. She tries something else. There are still holds in there. There are still deuce games. She wins 4 in the first set and 3 in the second and loses 7-6 in a tie-break because a player who is fresh and losing keeps generating resistance even while she is going down. When a player is empty, the loss comes in blocks, not a slow slide, a floor that disappears. 6-love is a block. 6-love is what happens when the body stops producing the thing that makes a game competitive in the first place. And she was not fresh. Which brings us to the second piece of evidence. The calendar. 4 matches in 5 days, 7 consecutive wins, 2 cities, and an international flight in between. A final that had to be replayed across 2 days. A rolled ankle in the last match before this one. She served for a match at 5-4. Lost the set 7-5, and then had to go win a 3rd set anyway, which means her body did not do the work of 1 match that night. It did the work of 1.5. There is no version of any professional athlete that survives that stack unchanged. The only surprising thing is that it took until the round of 16 to show up. Third piece of evidence, and this is the one nobody mentioned. Eala and Bencic had never played each other before. Not once, not on tour, not in qualifying, not anywhere. That matters because reading an unfamiliar opponent is not free. It costs something. You are running a live experiment for the first 4 or 5 games of a match, testing whether her backhand breaks down under height, whether she moves forward on the short ball, where she goes on second serve under pressure. That is cognitive work, and cognitive fuel is the most expensive fuel in the tank, and it is always the first one to run out. Compare it to the McNally match 2 days earlier. McNally attacked the net, changed pace constantly, and used variety specifically to keep Eala out of the baseline patterns she prefers. That is a puzzle. Eala solved it. But it took 2 hours and 39 minutes and an ankle to do it. Bencic showed up 48 hours later with a brand new puzzle for a player who had nothing left to solve it with. And now go back to where we started. The question at the top of this video was how one player becomes 2 completely different players in 9 days. It has an answer now, and the answer is that she did not. There were never 2 players. There was 1 player at 2 different points on the same curve, and we only noticed the curve existed when it came back down. There is one more number I want to give you. because it turns a stat from her best win into the explanation for her worst one. In that Svitolina match, the single biggest gap on the stat sheet was return points won. Eala won 24, Svitolina won 13. That is where the match was decided. Now think about what returning serve actually requires. It is the most legs-dependent skill in tennis. It is a split step, a first move, and a decision made in under half a second, over and over, off a ball you did not choose. You cannot hold your way through a match on talent when your return goes. You just cannot. And returning is the very first thing that leaves when the legs are gone. That is not a coincidence. The exact weapon that built the 7-match streak is the exact weapon that dies first when the tank hits empty, which is why a tired Alex Eala does not lose 7-5, 7-6. A tired Alex Eala loses 6-love. So that is what really happened in Toronto, which leaves exactly one question. And it is the only one that actually matters right now. So, what really happened? Belinda Bencic did not end Alex Eala's streak. Alex Eala ended it herself, in Washington, on the 1st of August, by spending every last thing she had to put her country in the record books for the first time. Toronto was not the ending. Toronto was the receipt. And then, because she is who she is, she dragged that streak 2 matches further on an empty tank anyway, through Parks and through McNally and through a rolled ankle, and only stopped when there was physically nothing left to give. That is not a decline. That is a bill coming due. Which means the question for the rest of this season is not whether she can handle Bencic. She can. She has handled far more dangerous players this year, and she has the head-to-head wins to prove it. The question is much simpler and much harder. Does the tank refill in time? The US Open is a matter of weeks away. She goes into it ranked 20th in the world, the highest of her life, on a hard court, in the country where the crowds have been showing up for her all summer with flags. Everything she built in Washington is still hers. The ranking is still hers. The title is still hers. None of that got taken back on Monday. But here is what I keep coming back to. Most 21-year-olds spend years hunting for the edge of what their body can actually take. They find it in a Grand Slam quarterfinal in front of 20,000 people in the match that would have changed everything. Alex Eala found hers in 9 days, and she found it in a round of 16 at a tune-up event, with the biggest tournament of her year still ahead of her. That might turn out to be the most expensive week of her season. It might also turn out to be the most valuable one, because you cannot manage a limit you have never met. We find out in New York, and we find out fast. I am covering every single match of her US Open build-up on this channel, and if I am right about the tank, you will be able to watch it refill in real time in the way she returns serve. Subscribe, and you will be here when we check. Because this video asked a question that only one tournament can answer, and I would rather not explain it to you 3 weeks late. Alex Eala lost 4 games on Monday. I do not think that is the story. I think the story is the 8 games in a row she won 9 days earlier, and everything it took out of her to get them.